Good day, everyone, and welcome to this session where, within the landscape of building stronger value chains for sustainable business and growth, today we are specifically going to look at women in business, women in tech, and supporting SMEs in Africa. If we go to the next slide, I'm Tanya van Lill. I'm the CEO of the Southern Africa Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, and it's wonderful for me to be here with you today. In terms of our discussion today, we've got a panel that we are going to engage with, and this particular panel is going to give us insights from their vantage point in terms of experiences within the SME sector in Africa, within infrastructure in Africa, as well as women entrepreneurs and supporting women entrepreneurs. I'm firstly going to give you a little bit of an overview of the private equity and venture capital sector here in South Africa, which then will lead into our panel discussion. Next slide, please, Manusha. So briefly, just an overview of South African private equity survey findings. With our research partner EY, SAVCA conducts an annual industry survey to really see what are the activities within the private equity sector within Southern Africa. And all of our research, whether it's private equity or venture capital or some of our impact studies, are available on our SAVCA website under resources. But what we can see from our survey highlights from last year's survey is that post the pandemic, the top priorities for the fund managers, particularly the private equity fund managers, is in raising capital and growing their assets. We saw that even as a result of, or even because of the pandemic, there were new investment opportunities that came about, but also, regardless of the pandemic, our fund managers were also still able to raise funds, which is good for the industry and for the region. There's a lot of focus within the Southern Africa fund manager space on ESG and impact investing, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that the development finance institutions historically have played a fundamental role in supporting private equity and venture capital on the continent. In terms of the private equity fund managers itself, a lot of their time was spent in not only the value creation, but also supporting the businesses that they've invested in, particularly surviving the crisis itself and keeping the businesses afloat in these difficult times. And we're going to hear from some of our panelists as well in terms of their experiences during the past 2 years. Transformation of the private equity sector is key, specifically in South Africa, where there's a lot of requirement to transform the industry, both from a race and gender perspective. We didn't see as much exit activity as you would normally see in a year, but this is very much as a result of the market conditions left by the COVID pandemic. And the funds under management within the Southern Africa private equity space has grown, which also bodes well for the industry because it means that there is money to be invested in the companies that need them. Thank you, Manusha. If we can now introduce our panel so we can get into the conversation about what has the pandemic really done in terms of the SME space, women entrepreneurs and women in tech. And with us today, we've got Sandile Hlophe. Sandile is the Africa partner from EY, and his particular area of focus is the segment leader for government and infrastructure on the continent. We've got Jessica Espinoza, CEO of the 2X Collaborative, and the 2X Collaborative convenes the entire spectrum of capital that is focused on gender lens investing. We've got Margaret Hirsch with us, co-founder of HIRSCH'S Homestores, the entrepreneur in the room. HIRSCH'S is the largest independent owned appliance, electronics and home furnishing store in Southern Africa. We also have Deborah Vouche with us, EIB Investment Officer for Private Equity Funds. She leads investments into private equity and venture capital funds, mainly in Africa and in the Middle East. And then Giles Marlow, CEO and co-founder of MES and DAK Corporation. And their focus is really on supporting the SME sector in Africa and making them ready to receive funding on the continent. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here. I think let's kick off and just talk about what has the impact been of COVID on SMEs in the region. So let's talk a little bit more in general. Jessica, if you can share from your experiences, what has been the impact that you've seen?
Thank you, Tanya, and hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. So in general, if we look at studies that have come out recently with fresh data from the crisis, we see that women entrepreneurs, but also really SMEs and entrepreneurs in general on the continent have been substantially affected by the crisis, of course. And we've also seen that the lack of finance and support that was already an issue for SMEs before the crisis has been further exacerbated by the crisis. If we then look specifically at women entrepreneurs, studies show that they have been disproportionately affected because they are often overall overrepresented in the most affected sectors by the pandemic. At the same time, if we look at specific examples, and our members in 2X, as well as myself, have been talking and doing research like more on case studies of specific SMEs on the African continent. And what is really interesting is to see that there are so many impressive examples of how SMEs have really pivoted to new opportunities, especially looking at this from a financial point of view, underserved segment of small and growing businesses. They have played a pivotal role in preserving jobs, even generating new jobs by identifying new digital models, for example, adjusting their businesses to take advantage of these new opportunities. And there are interesting examples. I know of at least 2 women-owned and led businesses on the African continent who in their respective countries were the first to go into mass production and really contribute to fighting the crisis in the very early days. What's interesting is that despite these opportunities and really the growth that some of these small and growing businesses that have been around for a long time, and they've really weathered the crisis well and taken advantage of these opportunities, they've still faced significant constraints when it comes to accessing finance. And a lot of the COVID support has also not reached them. So it's a bit of a mixed picture. I'm happy to go into a bit more about the gender lens opportunities later on in the discussions. But in terms of SMEs overall, it's been very interesting to see the opportunities, but unfortunately also that the support hasn't really been effectively trickling down in many cases.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for opening that for us in terms of just laying the foundation of the SME, the impact of the SMEs, and specifically women entrepreneurs on the continent. Margaret, as a woman entrepreneur, HIRSCH'S Homestores celebrating its 43rd birthday this year. You've been in the game for a long time. You also support other women entrepreneurs. What has the impact been from your particular vantage point?
Well, I think the impact of COVID has been more significantly impactful on women entrepreneurs and SMEs than men in the continent, because according to the Gallup poll that was conducted in 2020, over 1/3 of the women living in sub-Saharan Africa are single mothers, and therefore they're the breadwinners of the family. That's what people don't think about. They do everything. They're tasked with raising the children with little outside help and running their own businesses as well. They've got to run the business, look after the kids, make sure that the house is going. So if the woman got COVID, the family was really, really impacted, because the breadwinner would go and the business owner would go as well. And in the old days, the grandparent would be able to come in and take over if there was a problem. But with COVID, you couldn't get the older people involved because, you were scared that they would get COVID as well. So it was really, really difficult. So at HIRSCH'S, what we did is we got our staff and we put them into 3 groups. We were 1 in, 1 out, and 1 in reserve, so that when somebody in that group got COVID, because remember at the beginning, we didn't know, there were no vaccinations, we just had to go. When somebody in that group got COVID, they would all go off for 10 days, the next group would come in. Somebody would get COVID, they would, and then the reserve group would go in. So for us, it was really difficult. In March, when we hit that lockdown, we hadn't made enough money to pay our salaries for March, but then April came and we didn't take in 1 cent. Now, our salary bill is millions of rands every month. And we just had to say to everybody, we can only pay you 50% of your salary, and you're just going to have to work around that. And we sat with them with their budgets, and we worked around what they could do and how they could cut down. And we drew on all our resources. And thank God, as a company, we had a very good foundation. And I think it taught so many people to save, because they could draw on their savings. We had our savings that we had and our foundation that we could draw on. And so we managed to pay half their salaries in April. In May, we went on to level 5, when they said we could only sell heating appliances and cooking appliances appliances. Now, in May, it's still quite hot here, so we didn't sell any heating appliances, but we sold a lot of cooking appliances because people needed to cook their food and they needed to eat. So that was good. And so we survived through May. When we got to June, it got easier. We could sell other appliances, and so it went on. But we had to juggle these staff who were getting COVID all the time, you know, and all of the breadwinners, we had to make sure their families were taken care of. So for us, it was worrying because our savings were getting depleted, our access bonds were getting depleted, and we didn't know how long it would last. I think that's just the whole thing with COVID. We didn't know how long it would last. But we managed to combat it, you know, we just worked through that. And as I said to you earlier, when we just got over that, we had the riots and the looting. So we had to get through that. And yeah, I think as women, we are just so resilient. And with me working with other entrepreneurs in the country, just helping them to get over it. I said to them, I felt like I've got 5 grandsons and they've all got little train tracks. And sometimes the train falls off the track and you just need that person to put you back on track and you can keep going again. I felt like that person. I just kept picking them up, saying, no, you can do this. Just try this and try this. And so they went on. And I think if we can just have a roof over as women, we want a roof over our head, we want food on our table, and we want to educate our children. And that's was it. And we've got a wonderful woman here called Pearl Aura who has 11 children. She's homeschooled them completely, and she just carried on and she made the food last. She made sure that they were fed and clothed every day. I think women, it really showed us how strong we were. When we had the looting, a lot of people, and one lady in particular, just went and lay in her bed and cried for 3 weeks. And I kept saying to her, you've got to get up sometime. You've got to get up sometime. And I think that's what we did. We just had to carry on. But what we as women needed, we needed other women to say, you can do this. You know, we didn't need a man to come and say, here's a lot of money, I'm going to give this to you to carry on. We needed other women to give us the moral support to say, you can do this. You can, if you try really hard, you are going to make it and you will get better. And to pivot your business. This is what people need now. They don't need events and entertaining and that type of thing. They need food. They need to be able to do this and to put women on the right track to be able to come right and make it right again. And, you know, as a country in South Africa, we have survived and we have thrived through COVID.
Margaret, that's phenomenal in terms of showing that agility that's needed to be able to pivot. And it also speaks to what Jessica said about, you know, businesses had it really tough and hard, but some made it out stronger and better. So thank you for sharing that. Gilles, you support a lot of SMEs on the continent. I think you've seen a lot in terms of those that have fared well versus those that have struggled. There was a question that came in. If we can give examples of sectors that have survived and thrived in the recent months, based on your experiences with these SMEs, any particular sectors that stand out for you?
We think of the sector of those SMEs in Africa producing and to feed the local market. We talk about the barbershop, that small restaurant in the county. Those SMEs particularly happen to survive compared to other sectors. So local production, those I would think of. Yeah. Hello?
Yes.
Thanks, Gilles. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so maybe if I can just add, Sandile from EY, I think some of the other sectors we saw in the SME space, as Gilles says, if you look at the value chain, it's the ones that are servicing food production, energy, and connectivity. So if you look at the SME industries that were involved in providing gas energy supply, but also providing airtime services in their particular small community are the ones that seem to be resilient. So if you look at those value chains of energy, food, and connectivity, those seem to be the 3 areas where we've seen a bit more resilience when it comes to SMEs during the hard times. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandile. I want to ask, while you've got the mic, Sandile, in terms of your experience given government and infrastructure, if we were to look at the EU, what support do you think the EU can offer African SMEs, African entrepreneurs, and maybe from an infrastructure perspective?
Yeah, good, great question, Tanya. And I think looking at where the infrastructure gap is in Africa, particularly in emerging markets, it's really around connectivity in 2 forms. So one, railroads type connectivity infrastructure to be able to receive goods to supply and distribute on the continent. Then secondly, connectivity through communication, so digital infrastructure. So there's still quite a bit of a lag in terms of fiber availability and 5G. So investment in digital infrastructure, but also what we call the hard infrastructure, I think are the two key areas where the EU could assist. Also in assisting African governments in formulating public-private partnerships framework, so you can allow private sector to participate in assisting governments in developing and building some of this infrastructure. So for me, I think key area is connectivity, digital connectivity, and what I call hard infrastructure connectivity.
Thank you, Sandile. Deborah, any thoughts from your side in terms of interventions from the EU to support African SMEs and women in particular?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I work for the European Investment Bank, and just as a background, the EIB is the investment bank of the European Union in charge of making investment and supporting local economies in and outside the EU. The EIB is the only development financial institution that is exclusively EU-owned and therefore bound by treaty to implement EU policies and standards in its African investments. EIB has operated in Africa since 1965, so we are a long-term actor, and we have invested over the years 59 billion euros in 52 African countries, inter alia, supporting African entrepreneurs. But more recently, in 2021, we have supported Sub-Saharan Africa to the tune of 2 billion euros and Africa as a whole to the tune of 3.6 billion. And part of this financing went to the support of African entrepreneurs, to MSMEs. And we have, to do this, we have several tools to reach out to African entrepreneurs through credit lines that we extend to banks, which then on lend to SMEs. And last year in 2021, we provided 500 million of financing for banks. And we also added 100 million euros of financing to private equity and venture capital funds and microfinance operations. Private equity and venture capital and microfinance funds are powerful tools to reach African entrepreneurs, as they are providing direly needed patient capital for their firms to grow. This is why EIB, now through its development branch, EIB Global, has built through the years an African PE, private equity, VC, venture capital, and microfinance portfolio. And today we have in our portfolio 58 active funds, and they represent a total commitment of EIB of 1.4 billion euros. Obviously, those commitments are in turn complemented by other investors, which allow those funds to deploy their capital into African MSMEs and support to African entrepreneurs. What I would like to highlight today is also a specific program that EIB has been implementing over the past few years. This is the Boost Africa program. Some of you may have heard about it. It's basically a joint initiative of the African Development Bank and the European Investment Bank, with a 60 million euro financial support of the European Commission and the Organization of Africa, Caribbean and Pacific States Secretariat under the 11th European Development Fund. Boost Africa basically focuses on VC and PE funds investing in innovative business models and SMEs developing digital solutions across various sectors, including, for example, ICT, healthcare, climate mitigation and adaptation, education, financial services, and manufacturing sectors. And in the Boost Africa program, there's a particular emphasis on PE and VC funds focusing on youth and women. To illustrate with some numbers, through Boost Africa, EIB committed to 5 African VC funds, 3 of which have already had their final close, with a total of 285.1 million euros. And out of those 5 funds, 2 of them are expected to have their first close in the first semester 2022, with a cumulative total target size of 104 million euros. So basically, Boost Africa, as of now, is expected to mobilize 389 million euros in VC fund monies that will go directly to serve African entrepreneurs.
Deborah, that's phenomenal, and I'm glad to see that there's so many different touch points in terms of supporting SMEs. Jules, you had a few comments that you wanted to make in terms of EU support for the continent?
Yeah, thank you for coming back to this question, Tanya. Let me give you a little bit of context before I can accurately answer that question. According to the World Bank, MSME account for 80% of the players in the private sector, and they offer 9 of 10 jobs on the continent. But those MSME are facing 3 key problems. We're talking about lack of access to market, lack of access to technical assistance, and lack of access to finance, which is the greatest challenge they're facing. So the real question is, how do we assist those MSME at scale with speed, given the problem they are having? So we come up to the conclusion that there's a need of system solution that will allow us to provide assistance to MSME before, during, and after funding. Before funding, helping them to become more structured and ready for funding. Once they're ready for funding, connect with them with the appropriate lender or investors. And once they receive funding, continue assistance so that those MSMEs stick on a growth trajectory in order to create jobs, talking about sustained jobs, but also pay back the financier. That said, the next question will be, what does that mean growing the MSME sector in Africa? What does that mean for Europe? Growing the MSME sector in Africa means that those MSME require new need in terms of machinery, joint venturing, the need of capitals, and also knowledge transfer. And within the platform, connecting those MSME with a peer on the European continent has been proved, according to our data, as a very interesting opportunity for both sides, talking about creating impact in Africa, business success in Africa, but also in Europe. That leads me to answer your question, what the European Union can do to speed up the process. First thing to our consideration that if European Union institution could consider the burden of digital infrastructure and ecosystem as Africa as top priority. And second, invest in those in players in this sector, not tomorrow, but now. Then we'll be in a position to accelerate the MSME sector development and promote also your economic, and promote Europe's economic development.
Thank you, Gilles. That was really great. I really appreciate that. And I think it's also something for Deborah to take back with in terms of, you said the 3 challenges were access to finance, access to market, and access to support. So the access to finance, EIB is already, that's where they play a role. But as you say, the EU can maybe play a bigger role into access to market and support. And it also fits into what Sandile said about that digital infrastructure and prioritizing that. Margaret, as an entrepreneur, you feel free to add to this conversation, but I wanted to ask, as a woman entrepreneur, looking back 43 years ago, what support did you wish you had, or what support are you offering women now based on your lessons learned?
You know, the support, and I think that there's one thing missing out of all this is education. You know, in our business, which is predominantly sales orientated, training is paramount. What we would like to do, and what all my entrepreneurs want to do, is help employ well-trained staff to help them. But we don't have this. There's nobody educating the people. They're throwing money at people, and they're not educated enough to be able to handle it. And this is where the mess up's coming. When you hear how many billions are being pumped in, what's happening to that? A lot of it's being wasted. And I think that that's the biggest thing that we're not thinking about, especially with Africa. African entrepreneurs need to be educated in business. I went in totally uneducated. My husband has got a standard 7 degree, which my grandson's got, and he's 14. So we went in with absolutely no education, no knowledge of all these things that we need to know. And if you had to say to me, what is the one thing that Africa needs more than anything else? It is not the money, it's the education. So rather take that money and put it into educating the people, so that when ourselves as entrepreneurs, we're starting, and I start businesses all the time, that's my hobby, I start a business. I make that woman, when I've trained her, train 4 people. So we have trained people who can take over, and those 4 people train 4 people, and so it goes on. So I think, they say, what can the EU do? I think they could take the vast percentage of our 34% unemployed community that we've got in South Africa and start training them for jobs as cashiers, admin, drivers, repair technicians, stock controllers, salespeople. If we had a pool of trained people to work with, people who knew what they were doing. As an entrepreneur, when you start out with your first couple of years training other people to do the job. You know how to do the job. Well, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. You get thrown in and you start to do the job. You learn how to do it. But you've got nobody to help you. You can say, come in and take over. I need a day off. I worked for the first 12 years of my life without a day off because I had nobody who could do the day off. I took a day off and I was at Sun City and they phoned me to say the front door of your shop's been left wide open. The person I trusted to look after my shop had left the front door wide open. So, you've got to have people who are trained, and if the EU can help us with technological advances, for example, apps like we've just put in to do invoicing, to shorten delivery times, there's so much technology that they take for granted in Europe and the rest of the world that we are absolutely desperate for, but they don't give it to us. They'll give us the money, but they will not give us the expertise. And I believe, and I know I'm a disruptor saying this, I believe in South Africa we need expertise more than we need the money now. It's really come to that stage.
Thank you, Margaret. So a lot of good responses there. Sandile, I'm going to give you an opportunity to just add on to that.
Yeah, so I think the part that Margaret touches on is actually quite important. It talks to the coaching and mentoring aspect of entrepreneurship. So, and I think that's sometimes something that's overlooked in the types of funding. So mentoring and coaching and skills transfer is critical, particularly in emerging markets. And I think that's quite also an important point to direct funding towards coaching and mentoring of SMEs, which is something that actually helps people learn on the job and actually be taught from that side. So I think quite important. So let me ground it in terms of entrepreneur type speak, which is the coaching and mentoring. Yeah.
Thanks, Sandile. And I love the fact that that multiplier effect that Margaret spoke about. One person teaches 4, they go on and teach others. So I think that multiplier effect is really effective. Jessica, in terms of attracting more money to SADC and to Africa, what is there that could potentially be done to attract more money here? We've now heard what is it that we need, but how do we attract more capital to come to the continent, and specifically for women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting question, and I think the answer is slightly different depending on whether we talk about private equity and venture capital or if we talk about debt via local financial institutions. What we've seen, especially in the area of private equity and venture capital, is that the capital that is going to the continent, and I think it is, it has been substantial, but it's just typically going to the same places. So in venture capital and private equity, it's typically the same funds or the same fund managers that have been around for a very long time. And they themselves have traditionally not been particularly diverse and have therefore also not necessarily invested with that diversity lens. So I think what we've been seeing is that the capital is concentrated in certain types of businesses. They are, depending on market, again, it's hard to, because Africa is so diverse, but for example, we see in Eastern Africa, they've been concentrated among expatriate founders rather than local entrepreneurs. In Southern Africa, we've seen that they've been more concentrated among white entrepreneurs rather than Black entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs. And across the board, there hasn't been a lot of gender diversity in the allocation of capital, allocation on private equity and venture capital. So for us, or what we've seen, and we ran a very interesting design sprint with participation from SAVCA and from other private equity and venture capital associations and fund managers across the continent, we saw that there's really a lot of opportunities. There are very interesting, more diverse-led fund managers coming to market with more diverse investment strategies. And so I think for us as LPs, so as the DFIs, but also local institutional investors, pension funds, there's a big opportunity to back these investment strategies and also be more diverse in how we allocate our capital. Then on the lending side, I think there's also been an interesting trend, especially from the kind of international investors that are not African investors, but coming from other markets to Africa, is that they've often also had this mission of promoting, kind of international business going to Africa. And of course, there's also a business case for that in terms of technology transfer, perhaps, and just bringing more foreign direct investment to Africa. But again, it has led to more focus on lending opportunities for perhaps European or American businesses going to Africa rather than these SMEs in Africa. So again, a big opportunity, I think, to see how we can provide financing for more local financial institutions that also reach local entrepreneurs and that also serve the women's market, so that really have a gender lens in how they design financial products and services. We've seen a growth in other types of non-financial services, for example, like mentoring, like digital access to sales channels and platforms, trainings. So a lot of the things that Margaret also just mentioned, local financial institutions have been playing with these or innovating in these other areas. And I think that's a huge opportunity to reach SMEs more effectively, and in particular women entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that. And it's about what you're saying. It's about being intentional about where and how you invest and having the right data at hand to be able to make those decisions. Margaret, I'll come back to you now, but Deborah, I just wanted to get your views on the role of the EU and maybe about attracting investment onto the continent.
Yes. Generally speaking, with a women entrepreneur or women angle, or is your question just general for irrespective of the gender angle?
Yeah, so Deborah, maybe in terms of the role of the EU, if you can circle back to that after what we've heard from Margaret, Gilles and Sandile, and then also just about attracting capital to the continent in general.
Yes, now I wanted to go back earlier to their earlier comment, which was made about not providing only capital, but also support on the education front, technical capabilities. And I wanted to say that, for example, the Boost Africa program that I mentioned earlier is providing capital to private equity and VC funds, but has also a technical assistance component, whereby we provide support to the fund manager themselves, but also to the portfolio companies. We can provide support to the portfolio companies, for example, in assisting them developing their business plan, developing marketing strategies, and so on. So it's not just funding which is available, but there's also, we make sure that there's capacity building alongside. And I also wanted to add that there has been a EU initiative launched last May, the Invest in Young Business in Africa initiative. And this initiative has several building blocks, and one of these blocks is the ecosystem support. And it's exactly for this, to support the bedrock of investment, to support African entrepreneurs at the very beginning through incubators, accelerators, but also, I mean, we are in the early designing phase of this program, and we at EIB, for example, are proposing to maybe support the ecosystem by providing coding schools to help African entrepreneurs code and then launch their own startups. But to answer your question on attracting investments, well, I think this is the role of an institution like EIB to be the leader, to identify opportunities, to make investments, and by showing that we're there, this is a positive sign and catalyst to help attract other players, other DFI players alongside, but also private sector investors. So it is our role to be counter-cyclical, to be there when all the other usual players are shying away because of a pandemic or an economic crisis. So this is the role of EIB and the EU, is to play this counter-cyclical role and to be at the forefront. We are supporting, we are what we call anchor investor, so first investor in many funds. We have been anchor investors in a lot of VC funds, in Tilcom, in Partech. We will speak maybe later about a gender-focused fund, Alitea. We have been supporting them. We have been supporting Django Startup Capital Fund, which is another VC fund in West Africa, and we've been anchoring this fund. And through our presence, we've been able to attract other DFI players and also private investor.
Thanks, Deborah. I really appreciate that. There's a question that came through about the value chain, and Gilles, I think you sort of spurred this question, but it was talking about market access, and you can't talk about market access or value chain without talking about market access. And the question is, what support are we seeing for African market access market in Europe? Sandile, do you want to give it a bash?
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So talking about market access, yeah, I know every time we always maybe look to North Europe for access, but thinking about Africa and the size of the Africa market. So just some key stats. If you look at, Africa has probably got the youngest population, and in 2019 we had over 60% of population being young, and this is the Africa investment case. Hence why you're seeing a lot of investors and businesses wanting to open shop in Africa. So I thought it maybe rather than looking to the West Europe for market, look at the Africa market and what can be done to improve and have better access there. If you think about the recently established Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, it gives opportunity and access to a much larger market where I think businesses and entrepreneurs could market their goods into. So for me, sometimes it's about, we sometimes forget about the local market and tend to look at an offshore market, whereas there is huge opportunity actually in our own local market to actually drive that growth from that perspective.
Thank you, Sandile. And we only have a limited number of minutes left, so I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to just make some closing remarks. But there's also a question that came through from Ryan. He says, thinking of value chains in the context of competitive advantage, does this panel have any examples of African SME competitive advantage over European SMEs in similar sectors? So have we seen anything that's come out of Africa that's interesting and novel and more competitive as opposed to European SMEs? Any examples that anyone would like to share?
Well, I think, I believe that Africa is a big basket of the world. And I think that our food, and I mean, just see the flowers that have flown from Kenya to the whole of Europe. The food that comes out of here is absolutely the best quality. Think of the Cape and our beautiful fruit that comes out of there, the wine that comes out of there. I mean, the stuff that we've got is absolutely superior quality, and we can send it out there. But are they looking after us enough? I think now after Brexit, I think that they will look after us a lot, because they've realized how fantastic we are and how powerful we are. And we've got everything that they want in Europe, we've got here in Africa. So I think from that point of view, but if I can just get back to my favorite topic was, I believe that a lot of money does come into Africa, but I don't know that our African people are clever enough to be able to manage it properly. And I would like the expertise to come in and teach us how to manage that money properly. They give us this huge amount of money to be able to have these businesses, but are they teaching us how to handle that money properly? I say to people, God gives you a little bit of money, he sees how you handle it. If you handle it okay, he gives you a bit more and a bit more. But sometimes they get a whole lot and they don't know how to handle it properly. And I believe that if you had to say to me, what can the EU do for us? Give us the expertise, send us your experts on everything from IT to banking to running a business, all those type of things. We need mentors who can come in and show us from the ground up. That's what I do on a daily basis on a very small scale. I go into the townships, I take women without any education, I teach them to bake and how to make a living from baking and from cooking and that type of thing. And I think that it's perhaps in Europe they're thinking of as a completely different. They're thinking like Europeans. In Africa, you've got to think like an African. We are completely different here. And we need that expertise more than we need anything else at this moment.
Thank you, Margaret. Very valuable parting words. I appreciate that, especially from the fact that you are an entrepreneur and have not only had the hard yards, but you also give back. So that's great. Gilles, any parting thoughts from you? Any issues you'd like to raise? I know particularly something passionate for you is the mismatch between fund managers and the actual SMEs looking for funding.
Exactly. I just confirm what Margaret had just said, that from our perspective, we see that we need to digitize, we need to build digital infrastructure in Africa in order to provide those technical assistance to MSME. I fully agree with what Margaret has said, but we cannot do that one-to-one given the large number of MSME. We have to be capable to accelerate the process and scale the process across the continent. So again, I'm highlighting the relevance of having digital infrastructure and ecosystem, but also taking African SMEs online so that they can connect with a peer from Europe for collaboration, for joint venturing. I mean, to give you a specific example, we have companies in Africa looking for specific machines which are produced in Germany. Through our platform, we are connecting entrepreneur from Africa with entrepreneur from Germany. They meet each other in a period of time of 1 week. They know exactly what they want and deal are sealed. So again, we invite European representative to look at digital infrastructure building in Africa to support the MSME at scale with speed as a top priority. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilles. Appreciate that. Sandile, parting thoughts from your side?
So I think just parting thoughts coming back to the question around an advantage that Africa SMEs have over European counterparts. The one thing we've got going for us in Africa is a young population and skilled youth who need the opportunity to get skilled and participate. So my pitch would be one of our biggest differentiators as Africa is we've got an opportunity to bring more young people into business, into entrepreneurship. So any type of activity we can do that opens up opportunities for young people gives us good state. Secondly, those same young people are our biggest consumers and customers on the continent. So that's the second market. So think about leveraging those skills to build your business. So human capital, younger population, and opportunity to grow. So for me, I think the future of Africa lies in its youth and very young population. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Sandile. And I think the part of the youth and the fact that we've got so many people that are able to take on really good jobs and be skilled up to do so is something that the African continent can bring. Over and above the fact that we've got a big growing market itself, we also have people that are eager to learn and want to do good and looking for decent jobs. Deborah, parting thoughts from your side?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe some thoughts about, we talked about the MSMEs, and I come from the angle of supporting VC and PE funds. And what we've seen is that COVID has exacerbated the difficult fundraising climate for VC and PE funds. So my advice would be to fund managers, try and hang in there. This is a difficult road. But there are actors like EIB and other DFIs who are there to support you. Fundraising may take time. We have seen some attrition, some fund managers abandoning fundraising, but we have seen success stories like Aliteia IDF Capital, who have been fundraising for several years and managed to be the first true SME genderless investing. So that's a good lessons learned. Don't give up, and they were now able to pass on and in making investment capitals in women African entrepreneurs. So, and we are on our side, on the EIB side, working on the next generations of budget envelopes, mandates like Boost Africa to continue doing our job and supporting those PE and VC funds.
Thank you, Deborah. So a message for the fund managers themselves as well as the entrepreneurs: don't give up. There are people there who want to support you. It might not take or be as quick as you want it to be, but there are those that are in your corner and want to support you. Thank you for that. Jessica, your last thoughts?
Thank you. I can only echo what has already been mentioned. And I think, Africa is the market of the future, and the world is very interested in this market. So I think back to the question of competitive advantage, I think the competitive advantage is that local businesses really understand the local market and can tailor the products accordingly. So there's, I think, a lot of opportunities to back these local solutions and make them into the exporters of the future. The other thing, back to what Deborah just said, there are amazing fund managers on the African continent. We see many more than on any other continent that have a very strong gender and SME lens, and also back youth businesses and in general gender smart businesses. So businesses that promote women's empowerment and youth empowerment across the whole value chain. So I encourage you all to join us in the 2X Collaborative in 2X Ignite, our new initiative that brings together and shows this pipeline of fund managers from the African continent that is there and is an opportunity to invest in.
Thank you so much, Jessica, in closing us off on such a high in terms of the focus on gender-led investing, and good luck with the 2X Collaborative and your new role there as CEO. Thank you so much to my panel. You guys have been phenomenal, lovely energy and insights. Thank you to the audience for your engaging questions, and to the SAVCA and EY teams, really appreciate the support and EU for this platform. If you want any information about any of the research that we've done, please visit the SAVCA website. All of our reports are available under our resources page, or if you want more information about the actual panel, the content for today, feel free to email us at info@savca.co.za. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.